What is the nature of the challenges associated with particular method? When you collect secondary data for your dissertation, the easiest thing is getting that data, but it's actually really hard work to process this data. You're going to have to bring together different sources of information to create a picture of what the insight is. If the data don't fit the question, what question can I ask, and is it still a valid gap in the literature? And then you are on your way. Play to your own strengths, not just from an intellectual perspective, but I think also in terms of your own personality and the things that might fit that personality better. Which one is the hardest part? Data collection, analysis, or writing? Let me show you something. I hope I still have my cards from previous sections. This is a card that I drew in the last live where I was talking about the different ways of collecting data and how they're going to affect your timeline. So what you will notice is that whenever we use secondary data, for example, then it means that we are able, let's say by week 4 of a 12-week dissertation, we have the data that we need. And then this leaves us 8 weeks to actually process the data. So in this instance, when you collect secondary data for your dissertation, the easiest thing is getting that data, right? In a short space of time, you have all the information, but it's actually really hard work to process this data because it's not always that the information you need is in one place. You're going to have to bring together different sources of information to create a picture of what the insight is. And maybe you might find that even after your best efforts, you're not able to address certain questions. And so you might have to go back and refine your research question so that you can answer the question that the data can reveal insight on, right? So the easy part is in getting the data early, but the processing is really difficult. If you would say, no, I'm still going to do interviews, I'm going to collect my own data, then what you are saying is that I'm accepting that there's going to be a bit of friction in the beginning. So maybe rather than have all the data in 4 weeks, you might have your data in 8 weeks because you have to design your questionnaire, you have to test it, pilot it somehow, you have to find people who are willing to talk to you, and maybe those people can recommend other people through snowballing, but it takes a while, right? And then you are a bit late getting all the data that you need. But analyzing it is a bit easier because you collected it for a particular purpose. So analyzing it is easy because you have some kind of framework that's going to guide the process. But if it's a grounded approach, then also be aware that it's going to be a bit more difficult because you have some fuzzy idea of what the relevant constructs might be, but you don't have an exact idea. So you might need multiple iterations before you have some clarity on what actually is the most important things, right? So with the primary interview data, then you are sort of sitting between worlds. It's about, there's still some friction. You're going to be a bit late when it comes to collecting the data, but then there are things you're going to have to figure out when it comes to the analysis and write-up. Then when we talk of quantitative methods, especially survey methods, there's a lot of work that you have to do in advance, right? So for example, if I'm going to conduct a survey, I'm going to have to create the instruments, the survey instruments, and I'm going to have to make sure that I'm measuring what I think I'm measuring. And I'm going to have to test this with different practitioners, see that they make sense of the data of the questions in the way I intend for them to. Then I'm going to have to send the survey out and people are going to take their sweet time to respond. I make a few follow-ups and then eventually I get the observations that I need. But let's say you get your data somewhere much later, I don't know, week 10, but the analysis and write-up for these types of research is quite easy. So you have a nice suite of tools that you're going to use to test this data, right? So once your surveys have come in, you can actually check if the questions were still valid, if they address what you needed them to address. You can also be able to actually check if there are any problems, like is there multicollinearity? Are there two variables that are actually are there two variables that are actually measuring the same thing? Because if they are, it's going to affect your result, and you decide which one to get rid of. But all these tools are there, and they help you to actually figure things out. And then once you have done that, you have a very standard structure for writing out your results, right? So you say, we failed to find support for this hypothesis. This was our p-value significance level. That's it. And this is in line with, or it's in line with this research or that. So when it comes to which part is difficult, I think it depends on which method you're going to use. Each method has certain things that are easy about them and things that are difficult about them. So for me, with quants, it's quite easy on the back end. You can easily make up for lost time. But there's so much hard work that you need to do at the foundation to make sure that your research is still going to be valid. If you do a survey without testing it, and then when it comes to analyzing it, when the data is in, it's too late for you to restart that process again. So you have to put in serious work in terms of making sure that this is right. If you use secondary data, you get most of your data in quite early, and that leaves you a lot of time to figure out how you're going to make sense of that data and whether you need to add anything further to address a particular question. This also gives you flexibility in terms of changing the research question, right? So if the data don't fit the question, what question can I ask? And is it still a valid gap in the literature? And then you are on your way. So hardest depends on the method that you pick. It also depends on the personal preference, right? So for anxious people, I would say just get the secondary data, because within 4 weeks, you have full control of the process. You have the data that you need, and then the rest you can plan, right? If you like living on the edge, leaving things for last, you are not going to be panicking or doing whatever, then you're going to do this. You're going to do the quant methods and take that risk early on, right? But then it pays off in the end because the write-up is easy. So it's always a question of what is the nature of the challenges associated with particular methods, and which ones play to your own strengths, not just from an intellectual perspective, but I think also in terms of your own personality and the things that might fit that personality better. So there's no one inherently that's easier or harder. They just pose different challenges, and some people are more comfortable with some challenges than others.